Good morning, Liberty. It is Friday morning, May 10th, 2019. My name is Michael Bolden, broadcasting to you live from my home office and studio here in downtown Los Angeles for the 10th Amendment Center. It's 9:30 a.m. Pacific time, where we broadcast at that time like an atomic clock every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So good morning to you. Good afternoon, good evening, whenever you happen to be tuning in, whether it's live or in the archive. I am very grateful for you spending a little bit of your time with me today. And in this episode, I might cover it faster than I normally do, but there are two of my favorite bloggers that I read on a regular basis. Someone in the Tom Woods Show Elite group. This is a group that you get to be a participant in, that I'm a proud member of. If you support the Tom Woods Show over at tomwoods.com, I do encourage you to join us over there. So I support that. Somebody was asking, what blogs do you read on a regular basis? What are some of the things that you read, or some podcasts? And one of the sites that I go to every single day to look and see some latest commentary on liberty, libertarianism, the Constitution, current events. I don't like reading a lot of the mainstream news. And I tend to avoid that. I don't watch cable news. So when someone does something absurd, or some new horrible bill is proposed, you'll often find FFF.org, futureoffreedomfoundation.org, one of my favorite sites, one of their bloggers covering it. So today I want to talk about healthcare socialism, and primarily the Medicare for All bill. And of course, I keep putting that in quotes, whether it's in the show notes over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/goodmorningliberty, or when I'm talking about it, because we know that government never succeeds in what they do. Government always promises things. They overpromise, underdeliver. And then they underpromise on costs and overdeliver on the eventual price. So I want to talk about this Medicare for All. There's been a lot of debate about it in the last few days because they finally had this hearing on it. But as one of my favorite writers, Lawrence Vance, who writes for Future Freedom Foundation, I think he's been over at Mises.org, of course, LouRockwell.com and elsewhere, he says that everyone is avoiding the three big questions that need to be asked. So I'm going to cover that. I'm also going to give a quick reminder of what James Madison had to say about things like this, and then also point out that it isn't just the Democrats that are the problem. We have a serious problem when it comes to Republicans and Democrats when it comes to healthcare socialism. A quick reminder that when George Bush was in office and he had a Republican-controlled Congress, they passed Medicare Part D, which was the largest expansion of federally run healthcare, or federal involvement in healthcare, since Lyndon Johnson. And this sailed through and was signed by the Republican president. And of course, some people say, well, these are just rhinos, the Republicans in name only. But if these are the ones that keep getting into office, then there's a serious problem. So I'm going to do my best to cover all that today, and I appreciate you joining me for the ride, saying hello to some friends out in the live chat, of course, over on YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, DLive, and now Twitch.tv. So whatever platform's best for you, please join in and share it with your friends. Smash the like button, comment, all that good stuff. So hi to Tyler B., Justin Bayola, Tom Rankin, Dan Reed, Jay Armstrong, Jane Peterson, Raphael Migliano, Greg Gordon, Andrew Nappy, good to see you. I appreciate your message to me this week. Denver Libertarian, good to see you here in the live chat. Bob Brewer and Alan Mosley of the Gold Standard podcast. And Alan actually makes a good comment here. He says, today's episode reminds me of the Trump tweet where he said the Republican Party will become the party of healthcare. I did not see that tweet, but I am going to cite an older article. I think it was from Vance. Sometimes, because the messaging is so consistent over at Future Freedom Foundation, they republish over at LouRockwell.com, between Vance and Hornberger. And I believe Hornberger is running for president, or potentially running for president on the LP ticket. But these guys, their messaging is so consistent on liberty. Sometimes you can't tell them apart, so I guess I'll figure it out as I go through it here. Hi to Barb up in northern Minnesota. Thank you for being here. And Clay Bowler said hello as well over on Facebook. So whatever platform you're on, it doesn't matter to me. Whatever is easiest for you. And that's why we try to provide this show on as many platforms as possible. You can find most of them, not all of them. I got to update the page over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/goodmorningliberty. But let's get into it. First of all, this article that was published just on Wednesday, May 8th from Lawrence Vance, as Andrew Nappy said, Florida's own Lawrence Vance. I think he lives up near the Panhandle. We've republished a number of his articles over the years, but he's got this article that says 3 big questions that are not being asked about Medicare for all. And I think those of you paying attention to this is going to be kind of an easy peasy episode. There's not going to be anything really brand new and groundbreaking, but I think sometimes it's important for us who are on the same team here to kind of reiterate, hammer home these points so we all become relatively proficient in them. I know I'm not, so maybe just talking through this will help me in this, and then we can build upon what to do about it later on in another episode. So Vance starts out his article. He says, Congress recently held its first hearing on Medicare for all, and he puts it in quotes too. I probably got the idea from him. He's smarter than me. Legislation that would eliminate most private insurance, phase out Medicare and Medicaid, and institute universal socialized medicine. It was introduced in February by Representative Pramila Jayapal in Washington, and it was heard by the House Rules Committee for House Resolution 1384. So it has 108 co-sponsors, all Democrats, of course. We can't be surprised by that. And some of the presidential contenders have also been in favor of this. So he writes, the Medicare for All Act, quote, establishes a national health insurance program that is administered by the Department of Health and Human Services. I'm assuming based on the way Lawrence wrote this, that this is actually a quote from maybe the legislative findings or the overview of the legislation itself. I haven't read it. I don't need to read it. The title tells me all I need to know. Then again, government is good, especially Washington, D.C., at scamming you on titles. Think Patriot Act or Social Security or Federal Reserve. I mean, they're pretty scammy on these things. But needless to say, we know the legislation under the program, it must do 3 things. 1, it needs to cover all residents. And again, I'm referencing Lawrence Vance's article over at Future of Freedom Foundation. 2, provide for automatic enrollment of individuals upon birth or residency in the United States. And 3, cover items and services that are medically necessary or appropriate to maintain health or to diagnose, treat, or rehabilitate a health condition, including hospital services, prescription drugs, mental health and substance abuse treatment, dental and vision services, and long-term care. Now, mind you, just as an aside, when it comes to my own personal health, I'm a bit of a hippie. I have never had health insurance as an adult. I refused to get it under the mandate under Obamacare. I did not pay. I do file my taxes. I do pay them my tribute because if they don't, they're gonna steal my liberty and throw me in a cage. So that's a whole different story. But the line item for the penalty for Obamacare, I just leave blank. And that's because I know in the law itself, the IRS is specifically not authorized to use their normal collection techniques on that. I'm assuming there's a line item that they're keeping on me and racking that up. At some point, they're going to try to come after me. But for the time being, I feel good that I can at least easily say no to that particular one. So I've not had health insurance because in my kind of Southern California lifestyle, I happen to prefer most alternative treatments, and I can't find insurance that's approved by government that supports the kind of doctors or practitioners or treatments that I'm interested in, so I don't go. Anyways, that's a side note. So even this whole the idea for Medicare all, that means you're going to have government-approved treatments on everything. And anything else that might be outside the mainstream, again, this is the whole 2 wolves and a sheep voting on what's for dinner mentality. If it's a one-size-fits-all solution coming from Washington, D.C., then the services that we're going to have are likely going to be pushed by bureaucrats who are financially vested in getting their things approved. That's what I assume is going to happen. So that's another reason, I think, on the practical end of why I don't like these types of things. But I'll get back on track here. So Lawrence goes on. He says, the bill prohibits cost sharing, like deductibles, co-insurance, co-payments, and other charges for covered services. Private insurers and employers, quote, may only offer coverage that is supplemental to and not duplicative of benefits provided under the program. In other words, private insurance on its own will be banned. All these businesses are going to be put out. Whether you love them or hate them, Kaiser is garbage, obviously. So is Blue Cross. So are many of these businesses. They're partners with government, just like AT&T is a partner with the NSA. when you have these big corporations that are basically regulating out, partnering with government to regulate out competition, then of course they're nothing more than a corporatist arm of the government. And if you read things like Mises's Socialism, you learn, and I believe that's the right reference, the book Socialism by Mises, that it doesn't matter if you're talking about a fascist state or a socialist state or government run. It doesn't matter if something is owned privately or not, if the way they operate is dictated, regulated so aggressively by government that it is basically acting like government. There's no real competition there. So this is going to make it even worse, should it pass. Jim McGovern, who's the chair of the Rules Committee that heard it, is a co-sponsor. He said this about the bill, quote, "We need to expand the definition of national security to include more than just the number of bombs we have. It should also mean quality health care." And mind you, I know Chris Ann Hall, my friend who does a really good podcast. You should listen to Chris Ann. Chris Ann Hall has talked about this. I mentioned it in an episode previously. If you think the overtly avowed socialists are not going to use emergency declarations to claim that climate change or healthcare crisis are national emergency and national security issues, your head is in the sand. They're definitely going to do this, and that's why you should oppose those types of things all the time now. So Lawrence goes on. He says, echoing Barack Obama, McGovern maintained, quote, "People are not going to lose their health care." People are not going to lose their health care. Although all these businesses and jobs are going to be put out, but it's going to be run by the government. And so then it's going to be better. That's why this mentality from the left that the government today is run by the most evil person in history, Donald Trump. Let's give government more power because this has just got to be an anomaly and we'll never see somebody like this again, has got to be the dumbest thing I've ever seen by anybody. Now, some people on the left that I talk to are thinking and saying to me, and I just had a conversation with a friend who's moving back to the pit in D.C. from here in L.A., and he said to me, like, man, he's talked to me for a long time. I get the idea of decentralization. It's the only way we can have progressive programs. That if you're going to be a leftist, do it that way. This idea of giving more government, the cognitive dissonance of saying these people are totally dangerous, we should pass something that gives them even more money and more power, is just nuts. But anyways, McGovern says people are not going to lose their health care. You can keep your doctors. Wow. If this is not a meme, I don't know what is. Is PewDiePie going to cover that? Probably not. Go to your hospitals that you currently have. The only difference is you wouldn't have to deal with your insurance companies. Thank you. We have to deal with the DMV for health insurance now. Even worse. And of course, House Republicans, none of whom are co-sponsoring the legislation. House Republicans at the hearing pushed back. Tom Cole is a ranking member. He likened the Medicare for All Act to socialism. Of course. This bill is a socialist proposal that threatens freedom of choice and will allow Washington to pose one-size-fits-all plans on the American people. This is part of how even some of, and I don't know who Tom Cole is. I'm assuming he's garbage. He's an elected politician. They generally all are. So my default is that they're bad until they prove to me otherwise. It's not trust but verify. It's verify. Assume they're bad because they always are, or almost always are. Then if they prove to you otherwise, watch them for a while, and eventually you can assume that they'll probably do something bad again soon. But Tom Cole, this is what Republicans do when they're not in power or they're not holding the majority, is they say a lot of good stuff. And this I encourage. So Tom Cole is good. We don't want a one-size-fits-all plan for the American people, or for any people, really. I mean, but we can only do what we can do. And of course, liberal media outlets, Lawrence writes, were eagerly anticipating the Medicare for All hearing, and HuffPost, my favorite publication, used the occasion to raise three big questions. Of course, they have three questions about kind of the process and the procedure, and I like how Lawrence Vance played on that HuffPost article for his own post over at fff.org. They're talking about what does it mean? How can government control the costs? What are the consequences? And even the opposition is not asking the right questions. And whether it's these questions or primarily the opposition's questions, Lawrence is correct when he says the problem is they never get to the root of the issue. And he says libertarians maintain there are three big questions. And I think tenthers or anyone who opposes centralized control, decentralists, whatever you may call yourself, there are three big questions, and Lawrence nails them. One, is it constitutional? This should be the first question that should be asked on everything. And we've got an article that I've kind of held in the hopper for our homepage over at 10thamendmentcenter.com by Mike Meharry. We've got a lot of people submitting articles. If you write, email us, team@10thamendmentcenter.com with your idea of what you want to blog about. We'd love to hear from you. We happen to have a lot of things that are moving parts, and I have been holding on to this particular article for a little bit because I want to do a podcast about it as well. And he says, the article's titled, The First Question We Should Always Ask. And he's taking the same position that Vance is. The first question that you should ask about every program is not, how will government control this? What benefit will it have? How will it be implemented? None of those questions are the first question. The number one question is it constitutional? And if you had a flow chart, if the answer is no, then there are no more questions. You don't have to ask anything because the federal government shouldn't be involved in it. And if you want to do that, you have to look to the states and then your state constitution to see if you're authorized under the state constitution to do it. The second question, is it the proper role of government? I think those are very similar. Now, you can take that more broadly for the proper role of any government, maybe, but to me, they're the same as far as the federal end. And then three, who should pay for health care? And this is very important. Now, I'll start out here with this quote from James Madison. This is a meme that we've posted many times. And Madison said at one point, quote, "Charity is no part of the legislative duty of the government." No part. And if dealing with someone's healthcare crisis or healthcare needs is a charitable expense, then the federal government has no duty to be involved. It is not part of their job. And again, if it's between James Madison and his perspective on the Constitution and anyone else alive today, yours truly included, if I'm conflicted with James Madison, I'd probably have to think twice. Well, what's as far, not necessarily about any principle, but on the structure of the government under the Constitution, because he knew it better than me. I mean, when you have a problem, if I have a problem with my MacBook, right? If I have a problem with my MacBook, I may look at some forums. I may think I find something that's that can deal with it. But if I really want to know the truth about something, I contact Apple because Apple made the product. And you can kind of look at James Madison, even though he doesn't have like a help desk or live chat or anything. Madison is going to know more about the Constitution than any of us, period. So that's what Lawrence Vance gets to. Not only is, he writes, not only is there nothing in the Constitution that authorizes the federal government to have a Medicare for all program, there is nothing in the Constitution that authorizes the federal government to have a Medicare program for anyone. And then he goes into this laundry list of other things: CHIP, CMS, CMCS, Affordable Care Act, Medicare Improvement Act, National Institute for Health, CDC, FDA, HHS. Basically, almost all federal programs shouldn't exist under the Constitution. That doesn't mean, how do I word this? I mean, that doesn't mean that other levels of government can't be involved under the constitutional structure. Whether government should be involved in most things, in general, I'm going to say no. So, again, that's probably a different discussion for a different podcast, different show maybe. But Vance is absolutely correct. The federal government does not have the constitutional authority to be involved in this. And if we believe James Madison, this charitable exercise is not something for the federal government to do. Of course, people will change the view. It's not charity. This is a right. And government, under the 9th Amendment, has to protect those rights. And how else can they protect the rights from the big corporations who's screwing you all over? Only because of massive government involvement that's making the healthcare more expensive and lower quality. That's my argument. But the solution, of course, they're always going to say more government. So answering the second question, Lawrence goes on. He says, is it the proper role of government? And he says, it is an illegitimate purpose of government to provide or pay for all or part of anyone's health care or health insurance. Period. I'm on board with that. I hope you are. And Anna Reyes out in the Anna Reyes out in the live chat. Is it Reyes or Reyes, Anna? I'm so grateful for all your support. She says, "We will steal, kidnap, or kill you if you don't help your fellow human beings with paying for their health care." And that's basically what it is. So they're going to, of course, when it comes to the funding part, they're a little slicker about this. Dan Reed points out in the chat, they'll just print more money. And of course, John Prosser says, "I love this second question especially. I'm sure a lot of Democrats would say yes, but at least that's a real debate we can have. Otherwise, it's people who care about others versus selfish assholes who don't care about the welfare of others. If we're having that argument, we lost the debate." Yeah, it's the leftists, and I am a recovered one, are very good at putting people in a corner. And I know a lot of people on the right, libertarians, I think, are a little bit more open to different strategies than we find from traditional conservatives. Conservatives, I've heard many times over the years that protest, resistance, civil disobedience, various strategies, usually associated with the left, I will often hear from them, "No, that's a tool of the left. I don't want to be involved in that. I'm not a leftist, so I can't do this." But the leftists are pretty damn good at what they do. If you don't pay attention to their strategies, you're a fool. Voting the bums out is not working because we just keep getting more bums and bigger government. So that second question is a big one. And the third one, who should pay for health care? And Vance, of course, right on the money. No American is entitled to health care provided at the expense of another American. Health care is not a right. It is a service that can and should be provided on the free market just like any other service. And he says, don't look for any liberal media outlets to raise these three questions. And as for conservatives, they don't have any real answers to them. I don't know. Some of them probably do. We just tend to hear them more when they're not in power, at least the politicians. I think in the grassroots, a lot of conservatives are definitely more on the money on this. Although during the height of the Tea Party protest days, it was not uncommon to see people holding up signs at protests against Obamacare to say, hands off my Medicare, or hands off the Medicaid. Hands off Social Security. Don't screw up the Social Security. This is a common conservative talking point. And it's, look, these are socialist programs. Even if they forced you to pay in, they do not have an insurance fund in your name. They're using that money to pay for somebody else. This is a ripoff. It's theft. It's total robbery. Because if you don't pay into it, they're coming to get you. Anyways, next article that I want to cover. Bob Brewer makes a good point, and thank you, Bob. I'm so grateful for all the support you've given as well. Bob says, who should pay? The one closest to you. Bolden is doing it most constitutionally. Well, I'm not paying it, so I don't even know if I'm doing it all. I do pay healthcare costs when I go see a practitioner. I pay cash. My dentist, for example, maybe this is a little different. My dentist actually does cash. It was the last time I went, I got a filling, a cleaning, x-ray, and it was $99 cash. I got it all done. I didn't realize that this was how cheap it was going to be. I just needed it done. And the doctor took care of me, and he's like, okay, you're all done. Go out into the front. We'll take care of you up front. And I go to the front. There's no one there. There's no one waiting. I'm like, oh, crap. I don't go to these professions very often. This is going to be bad. Like 30 seconds later, the doctor himself comes out, pulling off his gloves, and he comes out. He's like, okay, well, let me just add that all up. He's doing the customer service as well. He prefers cash over insurance. He tells me this personally. When I told him, I'd rather pay. Can I put it on a card? He's like, oh, yeah, thank you. That's way better. And so I pay for it. He shakes my hand. He says, thank you for your business. When do you get that at a doctor? So I do like cash business when it comes to doctors. Of course, if I could just get a catastrophic only insurance plan, I would definitely consider that. But I looked at health plans for an individual under the Obamacare programs. I can't afford $300-400 a month, even if more people are donating at 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. You will not find me signing up for one of those government manipulated programs. They're terrible. So even if you're pitching in the $2 a month, $5 a month, $100 a month, whatever it may be, I'm going to use that money to reach more people with the message of the Constitution and liberty, not buy that garbage. But I definitely can't afford it anyway, so let's go over to Jacob Hornberger. Last month, he writes, While Republicans continue to profess their opposition to socialism, their love of socialism is being demonstrated in the healthcare arena. There was an article in the Washington Post, which is bad. All these mainstream media reports, you got to kind of dig for the kind of kernel of truth in there amongst the propaganda. But they put a couple of quotes in there, that kind of back up this dedication to Medicare and Medicaid. These are, as Jacob writes, two socialist programs enacted during the leftist regime of President Lyndon Johnson. You shouldn't be supporting these. No, Republicans, this is bad. Chuck Grassley, who has always been a bad military-industrial complex kind of guy, and on some issues I'm sure he says some decent things, but I've never been a fan of him. He says, quite obviously, more people have health insurance than would otherwise have it, as if the goal of government is to make sure more people have health insurance. Maybe some of us don't want it. More people have health insurance, so you got to look at it as a positive. Grassley. Let me scroll this up past my advertisement on the video. And as an aside, I'm wearing this Join or Die t-shirt. I've got a link in the show notes on this. Yesterday, May 9th, so it was May 9th, I think, 1754 is the anniversary of the publication for the first time of Ben Franklin's famous Join or Die, this snake chopped up cartoon. I think it was in something Gazette, whatever. So if you're interested in this shirt, especially because of the anniversary, you can go ahead and pick that up. The link is in the show notes in the archives at 10thamendmentcenter.com/goodmorningliberty. Another quote, Senator Shelley Moore Capito says, for those who are in the tranche of expanded Medicaid, I think it has been very helpful. So now they're on board. They're saying things that this has been good. We've got more people covered. Government expansion of Medicaid. You see in a number of states, I think Idaho, a number of states who didn't expand under the ACA because they don't have to. You can't force them, coerce them. This is a violation of the 10th Amendment. Even the court in NFIB versus Sebelius upheld this in their bad Obamacare opinion. They had one good part that supported the 10th Amendment. They don't have to expand it even under the threat of losing funds. This is total coercion of the states. So a lot of them didn't expand, and now we're starting to see some of the red states get on board. I think Idaho, maybe someone can tell me in the live chat who lives there. And Neil Archer is absolutely correct that it is a leftist narrative that healthcare is a right. MRGF78 over on YouTube, I don't think I've seen you here at the show. Thank you. Great question. Should the government? The answer is no. Right? And Shane Lackey, cops have no duty to protect. And Bob Brewer says, isn't it illegitimate to pay for anyone's anything? So some really interesting conversation here in the live chat. I'm very grateful. Gary Shin over on Facebook says the government needs to get out of the insurance business. I don't want them there. They're ruining it. I mean, if anybody looks at you could probably graph how much the government involvement in the insurance business is gone and how much people are complaining about how bad it is, the lines, the coverage, the service, and all this, that they're correlated. And Tom Woods did a great interview with somebody from the Oklahoma Surgery Center. They don't take insurance. They basically just go into this kind of direct primary care program. Either it's a recurring program or they just do cash up front and they list the prices. And they give really good quality care and low prices, much lower than what you would get under the scam that is healthcare insurance. So anyways, bad quotes from Republicans in support of Obamacare and expanded Medicare, or is it Medicaid? Hornberger goes on. He says, FDR, who ushered in America's welfare state way of life, understood this phenomenon perfectly. He knew that if he could just make people dependent on government largesse, the federal government would own them. The short version is, once you institute a program, it is very hard to get rid of it. John Adams, back when he was really good, I wasn't a fan of his presidency at all. Well, I can't say zero. He did a lot of really kind of foundationally bad things. But in his early days, in like the 1760s, 1770s, pre-revolutionary days, some of Adams's writing was just amazing. And he had written at some point, maybe this was a later one and I'm getting it all confused, but he said, and if you understand the context, it makes sense. He was writing and he said, liberty once lost is lost forever. You don't get it back from the goodness of government once you let them take it. And this plays out. He was obviously correct, because once government adds a new program, all of a sudden you find opponents to it getting on board. I think Ted Cruz is probably a good example on Obamacare, who was clearly doing something awesome when he was willing to do a shutdown when Obama was in office over Obamacare. But then probably last year sometime he ended up voting to continue funding for it because he was getting challenged by Beto. If you're going to do something that's right, it doesn't matter who's in office or who's challenging you. You do what's right because it's right. But this is what happens. People shift teams because over time it becomes almost impossible for government to give up the new powers and the new funding and the new jobs programs that are created out of government programs. And he goes on talking about Lyndon Johnson, which is Roosevelt's protege. He says, give seniors not only a welfare retirement dole, but also free or heavily subsidized health care, and they would thereafter belong to the federal government. In fact, though, Jacob writes, government involvement in health care, including Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare, occupational licensure. There was a really good article at fee.org on this recently. Insurance regulation and income tax manipulation have brought America a healthcare system that is best described as planned chaos. And rather than repealing American socialists, and I'm going through these sections because I think they just hit home so well, including conservatives, Jacob writes, instead began enacting reform upon reform. They're always talking about how we're going to fix Social Security, fix Medicare, fix Medicaid. We're going to fix the NSA. We're going to fix NSA surveillance. The NRA supported fixing the background check system and the NICS, the Improvement Act. You don't fix unconstitutional programs. The only fix is eliminating them. Whether it's HHS, the FDA, the ATF, the DEA, all these garbage agencies should just be gone. There is no fix other than disbanding them. And thank you, Jacob, for writing that article. I got to meet him for the first time recently, a month or so ago. Really, really nice guy. So one other article from Lawrence Vance that I want to cover today. This was from last fall, and maybe this is what Alan Mosley was talking about. I don't know if you remember, but President Trump did an op-ed in the USA Today to rail against this Medicare for All plan. And in the general thrust of it, absolutely correct. And it's unusual for a president to do an op-ed like this while in office. So part of it was really good. Part of it was junk. And here's what Lawrence wrote. Trump was railing against, and rightly so, the Democrats' Medicare for All proposal to establish a government-run, single-payer healthcare system that eliminates all private and employer-based healthcare plans and will cost an astonishing $32.6 trillion during its first 10 years. So Lawrence includes a little quote from this, and he's railing against this. But Trump also says this, keep this in mind, for those of you who support the president on Obamacare and healthcare issues. Trump said, quote, I also made a solemn promise to our great seniors to protect Medicare. Lawrence goes on. He says, of course, it's not just Trump. He asserts correctly that, quote, Republicans believe that a Medicare program that was created for seniors and paid for by seniors their entire lives should always be protected and preserved. And this gets into what John Adams, it's the trick. Once they get you into it, then the next group is going to be a senior. My age group, I'm in my mid-40s for another year. One more. What do I change? So I'll be 47 this fall. But at some point, my generation is going to be a senior. And now we've been robbed for our entire lives. Do you have to protect it for us and for the next one and for the next one? It's self-perpetuating. Eventually, someone is going to have to rip the Band-Aid off because you don't ease out of this. And it's in the latest Republican Party platform. They say, quote, it's their intention to, quote, save Medicare by modernizing it. Again, fixing it rather than getting rid of it. Fixing it. You can't save it. Empowering its participants and putting it on secure financial footing. When it's run by government, there is no such thing. Republicans also, quote, accept the responsibility to preserve and modernize a system of retirement security forged in an old industrial era beyond the memory of most Americans. All options should be considered to preserve Social Security. So this is the Republican platform. And this is really bad when it comes to the Constitution because there is no authority under the Constitution to have these charitable programs. There is no social safety net. I looked in the Constitution. I've read it. I don't see it there in the 30 to 35 powers delegated to the federal government. Everything else is reserved to the states. So if you want a socialist program, the truth is, if you want a socialist healthcare program, do it in your state. Vermont should do it. California should do it. And then you know what? That's the best. And people who oppose these programs in a weird way, because I know there's not going to be free market healthcare here in California. I'm actually on board with them passing it, because there will be no greater learning example than to see it play out in practice. And it won't affect the entire country as badly if it's just one state. And California, if it goes poorly, like we all believe it should, who believe in free market Austrian economics, this will be a very good shining example, because then a place like Oklahoma or Montana or Texas, and not that any of these places are bastions of freedom, but if they experiment the other direction with more freedom, less regulation, then we'll be able to compare right in front of our eyes instead of having philosophical discussions. So that's my weird kind of self-destructive support for socialist healthcare in California, to see it die so people can learn. I don't know, maybe you think that's terrible. Tell me in the chat. So Lawrence reminds us, Social Security and Medicare are socialist programs. They are cornerstones of the welfare state. And he says it again near the end of the article. Social Security and Medicare are socialist programs. I don't think we can say that often enough. And aside from this, he writes, it is neither constitutional nor the proper role of government to set up, maintain, or fund retirement, disability, or healthcare programs. Okay, cool. That's basically what I wanted to cover today, kind of just rail and say stuff that you probably already knew. I know people like Krista Turnell is right. Medicare is expensive and awful. Neil Archer, government involvement in anything raises prices and lowers customer service and care. MRGF78 says anything the government touches go to crap. If we put them in charge of the Sahara, this was a famous, who was the kind of the Chicago school? Milton Friedman. He said this. If you put him in charge of the Sahara, there would be a shortage of sand. Jane Peterson, I think you're in Oklahoma, right? Yes, go Oklahoma. Buffy says, I paid in for mine. You did not pay in. I think this is a misnomer. They took from you. Now, if you voluntarily paid into an insurance program, like in some states where you have a choice of maybe life insurance. Let's just use life insurance. No one's, I don't think, forcing anyone to get life insurance. That's paying in. It's a voluntary choice. It's an agreement between a business and a potential customer. When they take it from your paycheck, they are taking it. You are not given a choice. They are stealing from you and then telling you that they're going to provide you a benefit for stealing from you later by stealing from other people. This is what a Ponzi scheme is. It's really nasty. Chase Matsky says there's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program. And Thomas recommends you should look into a health savings account combined with a low-cost, high-deductible policy. You can make all your health expenses pre-tax plus a savings account. I will look into that. If you have a link to that, something you recommend, Thomas, feel free to post it here in the comments. And Ward Lawrence, I love you, man. The more government fixes things, the more they screw it up. Pretty straightforward. Robert Scott Bell, my buddy, who does a great show 6 days a week. I watch almost every day on healthcare freedom, alternative healing methods, plus issues of political freedom. It's a great show. I've been on a number of times. He says Medicare for all is basically corporate welfare for pharmaceutical monopoly medicine. See, this is why I watch Robert rather than me trying to cover this stuff. So check him out on YouTube. I know you can find robertscottbell.com. You can find a link to all his show and archives, like 25 years. Is it 20 years? Something like that, Robert. And Dan Reed says, it seems one of the biggest issues with loudly decrying something as socialist is most people find that a benefit, not a bug. Yeah, well, and there's a point that needs to be made to that. And I think that's a failure. I guess we got to cover that in another show because it's a factual statement. And that a lot of people do see it. And I've had people tell me, you know, this isn't the 60s anymore. Socialism isn't bad. And we're just going to have to find ways to overcome that. I don't know the answer to it. Shane Lackey over in the chat, I appreciate everybody. I love all the commentary here. I'm very grateful. It says all fiat currencies eventually revert to their intrinsic value of zero. No Federal Reserve equals no Medicare. Yeah, I mean, this is the root of a lot of things, of course. Almost everything. Yellow, blue, Austrian Watchman. That's a great username over on YouTube. The state is the great fiction by which everyone tries to live at the expense of everyone else. And I think there's another quote, maybe Austrian Watchman, you know better than I do, that basically once the people learn that they can vote away other people's money, you're never going to see the end of government. That's a paraphrase. Anyways, I'm rambling a lot. I'm trying to go through as much of the chat as much as possible. Neil Archer, Hawaii time, I have to get to work. Aloha to you as well. These are certainly communist programs, as Shane Lackey points out. But I hope you found this interesting, fun to watch. Maybe you got your blood to boil, all that good stuff. If you support what I'm doing here, you like this program, there are 3 easy things that you can do that are totally free. All the platforms that they're on are easily triggered. They've got algorithms. So smash the like button, subscribe, share. Oh, 4th one, leave some comments. I know you already are if you're in the live chat, but in the archives, make sure to keep doing that as well. I do look at all the comments, even if I don't get to reply to everything. And I'm very grateful for all of them. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. I appreciate you spending some time with me today, next week. I'm not sure what I'm going to cover. I've got a bunch of options. If you've got ideas, email me at team@10thamendmentcenter.com. Again, thank you for spending time with me today. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time here at Good Morning Liberty. Have a great day.